Despite having left the WWE in shame, Vince McMahon still found a way to be involved in the WrestleMania 40 main event. We're going to talk about how and who he was using that let him in the back door. We start in and around WrestleMania 39, where the most publicised involvement of Vince McMahon was during the Raw after WrestleMania, a truly terrible, remarkably terrible show that I don't think anyone, including Vince McMahon, enjoyed. That is not when Vince McMahon was first involved, though. He was much more involved in the build-up to WrestleMania 39 than most people realised. Vince was directly involved in the planning for Becky Lynch versus Trish Stratus, Austin Theory versus John Cena, Brock Lesnar versus Omos, and he was initially heavily involved in what was a planned match between Bray Wyatt and Bobby Lashley. That's before we even get to the main event, and Ronda Rousey's involvement will also be mentioned a little later on. It should be pointed out here that the entire Bloodline storyline has been a Vince McMahon invention. That includes everything involving Sami Zayn in the build-up to WrestleMania, so that means Sami Zayn and Kevin Owens versus the Usos was a Vince McMahon construction, and it also does mean that Cody Rhodes versus Roman Reigns, 39 and 40 this year, was a Vince McMahon plan. One of the main ways in which Vince McMahon was involved in WrestleMania 40 is actually from WrestleMania 39. Triple H wanted Cody Rhodes to win in the main event, to become the WWE Undisputed Champion and for Roman Reigns to be dethroned. Vince McMahon disagreed and not only pushed back, but cancelled the match result completely, making sure that Triple H could not now go ahead with it. What this meant was that it was an opportunity for a Jey Uso to be elevated in a match at SummerSlam with Roman Reigns, but also for Jimmy Uso to be elevated in a feud with Jey Uso. Neither of these things really genuinely happened, because I don't feel that Jey Uso and Jimmy Uso are any stronger now than they were going into it, but it also leaves a slight taint on the character of the Usos, the personality of the Usos, and the overall on-screen persona when you know for a fact that Vince McMahon was heavily involved in making them. Triple H could have pushed back against Vince McMahon, but Vince McMahon was able to convince Triple H to be on his side by allowing other wrestlers to be pushed that Vince McMahon was not invested in, including LA Knight and Gunther, amongst others. When it comes to the Raw after WrestleMania, Triple H had no power whatsoever to overrule Vince McMahon, but he did play it crafty a little bit in order to make sure he still got something of a Triple H era show. You will note a massive lack of surprise returns outside of Matt Riddle. Triple H is not a fan of big returns like that, or at least overloading a show with them, and while Vince McMahon is, Triple H hadn't booked anyone, so Vince McMahon wasn't able to get anyone who wasn't already nearby, such as Matt Riddle. The Raw after Mania was in fact so poorly received that TKO told Vince McMahon, "You're out of creative, you're not involved, go home." One of Vince McMahon's final acts around Royal Rumble time before WrestleMania 39 was to nix a planned Ronda Rousey versus Becky Lynch match, hence moving Becky into the tag team division around Royal Rumble time and having Rhea Ripley win the Rumble instead. Vince McMahon did this under the instruction of Triple H, so that Vince McMahon would still get his big moment with Cody Rhodes losing at WrestleMania. This was the beginning of the end for Ronda Rousey in the WWE, as she has already mentioned. Her contract, which she signed during Vince McMahon's tenure, gave her significant power over her booking and the direction of her character. Triple H did find this difficult to work with. I've reported more on this on Spoiler Warning in the past. It's an easy search on YouTube. This breakdown in communication eventually led to Ronda Rousey leaving the company because Vince McMahon allowed Triple H to overrule him and cancel the match that Ronda Rousey wanted to have happen. Ronda Rousey versus Becky Lynch was a match that Rousey wanted upon her return. It never happened. Triple H simply didn't believe that fans were into it. I should also point out that Ronda Rousey ever since has been very vocal about Bruce Pritchard being sort of an arm of Vince McMahon, a voice of Vince McMahon, speaking for him, and in fact making sure that Vince McMahon's interests are still respected within the WWE. Bruce Pritchard's name will be coming up again soon. While Rousey has been vocal about Bruce Pritchard, there are a lot more people involved when it comes to connecting directly with Vince McMahon and voices in the WWE. Kevin Dunn was another, as well as others backstage who've been quietly removed from the company since, in the manner of the internal investigation that's currently happening, while the external investigation, because of Vince McMahon, is happening against the WWE at the same time. This may or may not include, by the way, the recent firings from the talent relations department. While the investigation into Vince McMahon is also an investigation into the WWE, and that will drag more people from the WWE into it, the WWE are protecting themselves largely by getting as much distance from Vince McMahon as possible, by and large. That's why, by the way, you won't have seen or heard any references to Vince McMahon on WWE programming for a very long time. It's why there's a very new then, now, together, forever, whatever it is, at the beginning of shows as well. One of the reasons they keep focusing on this being a Triple H era is just a way to say, well, it's not the old era. We're all moving on, aren't we? And this is believed to be a protection ahead of schedule for the investigation taking place against them. Unfortunately, they have not been entirely successful. Vince McMahon making changes to the WrestleMania 39 card had a clear knock-on effect on the WrestleMania 40 card, and there is a belief that he still has been in contact with certain creative and talent voices in order to ensure that his vision is carried over into WrestleMania 40. This started over a year ago, and in fact does continue with the fact that he's still in direct communication with people such as The Rock and John Cena. Both The Rock and John Cena featured in the WrestleMania 40 main event, with The Rock also featuring in the Night 1 main event the night before. The Rock is also now on the board for TKO, and he also has a direct voice in the creative team in the form of his personal writer Brian Gewirtz. This being the same Brian Gewirtz who openly disputed reporting from Fightful about The Rock's segments going over time. So these are not people who are happy to be quiet, calm, and allow things to be said about them. There is a belief that through The Rock, Vince McMahon had direct involvement in shaping the main event of WrestleMania 40 Night 1 and Night 2, meaning that the current Bloodline story and Cody Rhodes as champion were in fact Vince McMahon decisions, when The Rock and Triple H sat down to work out the eventual structure of the main event of WrestleMania. It does seem like there have been conversations between The Rock and Vince McMahon beforehand, meaning that Vince McMahon might not have been in that room, but he very much was. We can comfortably confirm that some of this is true. Vince McMahon did handpick Solo Sikoa as the next tribal chief while writing the Bloodline storyline, and in fact the entire Roman Reigns return from 2020, when he first came back, won the championship, and became the head of the table and the tribal chief, a storyline so heavily celebrated, came entirely from the mind of Vince McMahon. Now, admittedly, Paul Heyman has been directly involved as well, and the two of them have been conversing about it, but it also means that there is still a possibility that as regards the Bloodline storyline, Vince McMahon and Paul Heyman are still in contact. After all, the two of them worked directly together in order to get this one over the line in the first place. We also know, because Vince McMahon changed the result of the main event at WrestleMania 39 and pushed the win back to WrestleMania 40, we know it is Vince McMahon who decided that Cody Rhodes would become the undisputed WWE Not Universal Champion at WrestleMania 40, the exact result that we saw at this year's WrestleMania. Vince McMahon planned the main event a year ahead of schedule to be Cody Rhodes versus Roman Reigns 2, with Cody Rhodes winning. Now, Triple H and Michael Cole are right. This is a new era. The Triple H era, an era in which they are trying desperately to distance themselves from Vince McMahon, but they still can't escape the fingerprints of Vince McMahon. He has his finger in every pie he possibly can. The Liv Morgan championship run, the very brief one when she cashed in on Ronda Rousey, was a Vince McMahon creation that Triple H had to carry through. So many matches of last year's WrestleMania were Vince McMahon creations. And in fact, this year's WrestleMania, the involvement of The Rock, the fact that it was pushed back from last year, Vince McMahon was heavily involved in the main event scene. And that's just what we know about. Because you also had Cody Rhodes directly thanking Bruce Pritchard, someone who Ronda Rousey openly said was a voice for Vince McMahon, in his speech after winning the championship. It means there is still work to do for Triple H to successfully say this new era is entirely separate from the Vince McMahon era that came before. Characters that McMahon champions such as Jey Uso find themselves in difficult positions because of this. Now, if Vince McMahon returned tomorrow, I can't say how the crowd would react. If he walked down on Raw doing that strut that he's known for and said, "No, we're forever, we're together, you can't be rid of me," I honestly think quite a section of that crowd would cheer. No Chance in Hell would undoubtedly still be sung by a subsection of the audience, but wrestling is notoriously right-wing, so you know that crowd is also full of the F your feelings snowflakes that you see all over the world right now. And Vince McMahon, much like Donald Trump, would be one hell of a champion for them. Thankfully, that seems unlikely. If you want to know the chances of Vince McMahon going to jail, click the video on screen now to detail more accusations against McMahon than are currently public knowledge. I'll see you for the next one.